Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Summer School. Today, we're joined with another amazing guest, Hannah. Um, Hannah, I discovered online on social media, and I feel like your work has evolved a ton, and you're now teaching, and even the work that you're putting into the Instagram presence of how you're going about marketing, even your education. I've DM'd you personally. I was like, girl, this is really impressive. So I just feel like it's super awesome that we're going to talk about some of the things that she's been teaching on and has classes on. So I'm going to let you intro yourself and tell everyone what that is and what you're passionate about right now and what you're kind of educating on. And then we're going to dive into a little bit of it. So tell everyone about yourself, how you got started, and then since I haven't told anyone what you're teaching on, just go ahead and tell everyone kind of what your like little niche is right now.
Yeah, awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Summer, I feel like you are one of the photographers I first remember ever looking up to. I'm sure everyone relates to this, but
Mm.
early in your career, there's a few key photographers who are like your first industry leaders, who you recognize as the photographers, and you were one of them.
Stop it. You're too nice.
And I remember at the time you were in the middle of education, so you only had a wait list. And I remember I kept going back and like checking your wait list and waiting for it to come out because I was like, this is who I need to learn from. But okay, so my intro, sorry. I have been doing photography for about 10 years now. I got my first camera when I was 13 years old, and then I started doing photos of friends and whatnot in high school, which evolves into getting paid to do your friends' senior portraits by their moms. And then, it turned into a side thing throughout college and whatnot. And then I've been doing weddings for about maybe 6 or 7 years now. And I've been a full time photographer only for a bit over a year now. So, my niche of photography is this kind of cinematic storytelling approach. I do like to shoot weddings with more of a documentary style. I'm very light on the posing, but then when it comes to my couple sessions, I'm really just trying to tell a story and approach photography in a way that's rooted in the in a way that's rooted in cinematography rather than what we're traditionally taught in photography. I rebranded my style about a year and a half ago and fully took this approach. It was more just creative work that I was doing this kind of style. And ever since then, my work really just took off and people really resonated with it. So now I have the opportunity to be an educator through my online course, as well as hosting retreats where I get to share with others this approach that I feel so passionate about.
What was there anything in specific that made you want to switch to a more cinematic approach? Was there any like shift or discontentment in even your own work or burnout that kind of made you have that like light bulb moment? I feel like I had a light bulb moment with just like longer form sessions and stuff like wanting to do them. And so I'm wondering for you, like, did you ever experience a moment like that like made you really want to take that transition, or were you just drawn to it?
Yeah, so I remember very well that I was just so uninspired by the work I was doing. I live in Colorado and we have little foothilly mountains. If anyone from Colorado heard you call foothills mountains, they would come for you. So just think of very small mountains. And everyone just wanted the same exact photos. We would go to the little scenic area 15 minutes down the road from me. They'd stand in front of it, we'd smile and take pictures, and it'd be a done deal. And I was just so bored with my work. And I remember always loving cinema and watching movies and feeling so inspired. I loved watching music videos. That
Hmm.
was like a very niche thing for me. Instead of watching TV, I would just sit and watch music videos. And I was always so inspired by the Lumineers music videos and how they all flowed into one another and told the story. And I've always been really artistic. I was a painter before I was a photographer, and, art really got me through high school. But then when it came to my photography, I was honestly doing the most basic, boring work ever. And I was like, where is the disconnect? And that's when I was kind of like, why don't I just try something totally new, something that doesn't really involve posing? And also, I want something that seems like it resonates with my couples themselves. So obviously, I couldn't just right off the bat, incorporate that into client work. So I put out some model calls, did some creative shoots, and started testing the waters with that approach and everything. And I remember when I shared that work, the first shoot I ever did with that approach, I got so much feedback, like so many positive messages. I remember waking up and crying, reading all of them because my work had never been so well received before. And that was kind of like the confirmation that I needed that this is the direction I was kind of always meant to go in.
Hmm. That's amazing. Yeah, for me, it was like I lived in the PNW, so kind of similar, like going to very similar iconic naturey places. And I had a good bit of like traveling to the PNW clientele. Like maybe I wasn't leaving the PNW, but people were coming to me or visiting, they're in town or whatever, want couples photos. So I feel like at one point I went between Cannon Beach and the North Cascades like 7 or 8 times in 1 month, and I was so done. I was like, also, those are not that close to each other, both 3 or 4 hours from where I was living, and I it sounds bad saying that because there's so many photographers that live in, like, Texas that would dream to shoot at Cannon Beach, So I don't mean it in that way. It is a beautiful place, but in the sense I just felt like I was doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I looked at my now husband, he wasn't then, and I was like, "Do I just stop doing couple shoots? Like, I don't like this anymore. I'm doing the same thing, the same kind of people, and I'm just like kind of bored. Like, I'm not like they're good photos, the clients are happy, but I just don't love it?" And that was when I started incorporating more like long form sessions. And then those kind of led to a more like storytelling type approach, which even now today, I don't necessarily classify myself under like cinematic photographers, even necessarily storytelling now. I have taught on it before in the past, but I actually kind of think I realized that I come at things from almost like a creative director approach, kind of like mixing fashion with story, but less emotive and more structured. Which, anyways, so I am glad to have people on it that like are passionate about it in the more emotional sense, or like movies, cinema, things like that. Because I do know there's a lot of that and a lot of people in the wedding industry that are like that. My brain's kind of analytical, so mine were always like really planned, and there's like structure to how I was capturing the things. But anyways, I moved into long form sessions, and it was like a journey for me. I started with trying to implement 2-hour sessions because I knew I liked them more with, client work already being booked. And then eventually just got rid of everything that wasn't like, and I was like, well, the only thing I shoot is 2 to 3 plus hours, like take it or leave it. Like, and that was like kind of the journey that started my journey into like long form sessions. But now they've evolved. Sometimes they're not like overly cinematic. Sometimes they're like in a studio and then they're something else. But overall, long form shooting just like really resonated with me so much more because I felt like I could get so much more creative and not be stuck in doing the same thing on repeat. Because in 45 minutes, an hour, like at the same spots all the time, like it's just not, I don't think it is technically fulfilling to anyone except for maybe your checkbooks. Like maybe. And even then, it doesn't have to be that way. You know what I mean? You can still book clients with long sessions. But yeah, so that's awesome. I love always asking people how they got into it because I think for most, there is that kind of light bulb of like some sort of burnout moment. Like they don't love doing the same thing, they need more creativity. I love that yours roots in like loving like music videos and pulling from that. So I think it'd be kind of cool to go into that a little bit. What are like some tips and tricks that you have for getting and having like a more cinematic or maybe like emotive approach to your sessions?
Hmm. Yes. So I think that the first place we kind of start is not boxing yourself into anything. And kind of piggybacking off what you were saying with, you started leaning into those longer sessions, but now sometimes they look like studio sessions that are more editorial, and other times they do look more cinematic. And sure, being in this niche is kind of what we're talking about, but for me it actually starts with like no labels, no boxes. And the way I talk about it a lot is, to me, cinematic is, and like what we're seeing in cinema is just this like romanticized, beautiful version of life. You know, it is okay. How I like to think of it in one way is November in my town is just really uninspiring to me. Everything is so dead. Like, you don't really have that warm sunlight anymore. You're in that weird in between where everything is just like yellow and dying, and there's no green, and you just have these like dead trees, right? These trees without leaves. But then you see that in a movie, and it is like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And movies have this way of taking these cluttered kitchens and making them look like this beautiful place where you start your family, you know? And these things that we typically see as uninspiring as just the most beautiful things in life, but we love them and we're so drawn to them because it's real, it's relatable. And to me, that's what something being cinematic is. It doesn't necessarily mean it's this huge production, it's just these mundane things in a very beautiful light. So I say not boxing yourself in, because a lot of people think cinematic and then they think that they need to start this whole kind of production. Like, I need to get fog in a can, and I need to rent this insane Airbnb, and I need to find these model couples. And, you know, the images will come out of when you're just creating from a place of how can I challenge myself, if that makes sense. And the number one, I don't know if rebuttal is the right word, but the number one thing I hear is like, "Oh, but Hannah, you don't get it. You live in Colorado. Um, I live in Iowa, and there's nothing but cornfields." But that is so funny to me because I think some of the most talented photographers I've seen come out of places like that because they have learned to become inspired by what's around them. And I find that a lot of these photographers that feel stagnant, including myself, live in these beautiful places like Colorado, and they're just relying on, you know, the iconic mountain backdrop to tell the story for them and be the photo. So the first thing I'd say is just not boxing yourself in and finding inspiration in the ordinary. You know, start being aware of like how the light pours in through your blinds at different times during the day. And I don't like cooking breakfast because it's really dark in my kitchen in the morning, but I love making dinner because that's the time when I get light through the window. And that's when I feel really inspired to be in there. And then something like that translates to photography because now I'm paying attention to light and how it's affecting our day-to-day life, you know, walking around your downtown, look at couples interacting with each other, see like how they're holding hands when they cross the road, or pay attention around you in a bookstore. Like, just becoming aware of the beautiful things in your day-to-day life is going to help train your eye to recreate these things when it comes to telling a story. Because something I'm explaining at my retreats a lot is move the couples away from each other. Like, in real life, you're probably not sitting on your partner's lap. Like, you're, I mean, like, to each their own, but for the most part, I don't think you guys are just sitting on each other's laps. But when we do these traditional post photo shoots, we're constantly putting couples on top of each other. But in reality, they're interacting with each other. So, stuff like that, that's how it's gonna, you know, help when it comes to your work, because then you're gonna be like, wait, in the bookstore, we're not like kissing in the middle of the, you know, on top of each other, sitting on each other's lap. Maybe they're facing away and they're looking at different bookshelves. And that's going to create a really cinematic image, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Um, those are like starting points. I can keep going, but also want to give you time to kind of
No,
build off
say
that.
whatever you wanna say. No, this is good. I love hearing, like, what your approach is because everyone's is gonna be so differently, you know what I mean? As far as yeah, like, approach different types of images within a session, what do you feel like changed the most in your approach? Like you said, like, space between couples, you probably weren't doing that before. You know, what kinda became even different within posing? Like, was there things you felt like you had to learn within posing to kinda get to this point that you are now?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest difference in my work is all my old work is still.
Mm,
If you, and this is something that I preach and preach and preach, and then even when I'm giving feedback on other people's work and they're like, why isn't it look cinematic? I'm like, well, your couple is running and you shot it at like one thousandth of a second for shutter speed. Like, that is not natural to the human eye. Like, why is you'd never see anyone like running with that level of crispness in real life. So it doesn't look natural to the eye. So one of the biggest things I incorporated in my work that was a game changer is motion blur. Movies are shot at 24 frames a second, which translates into usually 1/50 for shutter speed. And that motion blur, those frames per second, 24 frames per second, was chosen because that's what's natural to the human eye. If you right now take your hand and like wave it in front of your face, you'll see that you can't like see all your fingers. They're blurry. And that's what motion blur looks like in cinema and photos when we're able to capture it at a slower shutter speed. So I'm incorporating a lot of motion blur in my work. When I'm doing photos of couples running, I'm usually shooting at it at 1/40th, 1/50th, 1/60th, dancing, spinning, and that is just what's making these photos come to life. And I'm so passionate about motion blur because it's the closest we can get to capturing a moving picture in a still frame, you know?
mm,
So, motion blur is really big. Keeping space between my couples, like we were saying before, not doing any of the cheesy, like going down the list of poses, press foreheads, Eskimo kiss. Like, I mean, sure, they can, and there's a time and a place, but when I think about the moments I share with my partner, they're usually not like us pressing foreheads and just like gazing into each other's eyes. And honestly, if anything, from my own experience, that makes couples uncomfortable like more times than not and really disrupts the flow of a session. And that leads me into probably the third biggest difference. And I guess this isn't entirely posing, but just being really intentional with my couples and being aware during the session of how they feel and how they're responding to certain things. And then building off of that energy. If I give my couples a prompt, I'm being really intentional and trying to see like how they're responding to it. Do they seem like they're into it? Do they seem like they're uncomfortable? Something I bring up to a lot of my wedding clients is when we go, back when I did traditional posed stuff, I would get to wedding party photos and it would be like, ugh. And I'd get so much resistance from the wedding party and they'd all seem not into it. And it'd be these stiff posed photos and moving everyone's elbows. And it would just be a buzzkill. Like it would ruin the flow of the day. We're getting ready. There's so much excitement. There's so much excitement. And then I come in and do wedding party photos and post them. And it's like, the energy level just
mm,
into the ground. And that's the opposite of what I want to do. I want to keep it going. I want to match their energy and I only want to add to that. And I think that is so important because when you're doing this traditional posed work, I think it's easier to not be intentional because you're literally like a lot of times just going down a list and checking these boxes of different poses that you've done. And it's like, what's the word? It's you're on autopilot, you know? it's like clockwork. You do these poses at every session. Whereas when you're storytelling, you're just feeding off of each other and you're building on a story. So you're able to be intentional and present and really aware of how to move into the session in a way that only builds their energy, which results in really incredible photos where they look like they're comfortable and intimate and having fun.
So with weddings, are you still taking the traditional shots, or are you literally, like, trying to, like, maybe the lighting's not ideal, but the vibe is more there, so you're willing to, like, make compromises in some areas to maybe have a little more of an imperfect shot that is more perfect to you because it's flowing better, the energy is better within the client as well. I'm just curious on that side of things because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, yeah, like, I still have a lot of shots, I just have to get," like, the client, uh, no matter how creative my work is, still just there's just expectations oftentimes.
Yeah. You know, and I think it's funny because I remember I did a mentorship a while ago with Tracy Jade Photo.
Yeah.
And I feel like she's one of the, like, pillars of documentary style photography. Like, she's it. Like, she's not posing anyone for anything. And I remember asking her, "So how do you do post portraits as a documentary style photographer?" And she's like, "I don't. I don't pose them." She's like, "I just follow them around, if they wanna watch the sunset, whatever." But so I found that for my own work and my style, I kinda wanted to land somewhere in between.
Mhm.
So when I'm doing wedding portraits with my couples, I'm talking to them beforehand, doing a lot of getting to know them and learning what's gonna make them feel comfortable on their wedding day, what's gonna make them feel uncomfortable, exactly what they're looking for. And then I kinda say, "If you guys got to sneak away on your wedding day and got a little break, what would you guys do? Would you go to your hotel bar and take a drink? Would you go watch the sunset? Would you go back up to your hotel room and eat some pizza, you know?" So we'll do that for a little section of their portraits if time allows. And that's me really just being fly on the wall, letting them have their moment, letting them take a step away because I do think it can be overwhelming when the only free 15 minutes a couple has on their wedding day is like a full blown photo shoot? So I'm trying to just let them have 10, 15 minutes and follow them around, take a step back, kind of fly on the wall, totally hands off. And then if my couple wants, we'll go into maybe another 10, 15 minutes of portraits, which about three-quarters of it looks like creative portraits, just letting them run around, letting them spin with each other, maybe letting them do a private dance together. And then I say that I really learned how to work fast because I used to do so many mini sessions. You know how to like pop out a lot of photos in a short amount of time when you do mini sessions. So the last maybe 5 minutes, we'll just grab some of the traditional for Facebook, for grandma shots
Mhm.
where they smile. We'll do a funny one, where they point at the ring, look at each other. And I mean, we'll do maybe 5 variations of those shots and call it a day. And
Mhm.
we make it really quick. So that's how I'm really approaching portraits on wedding days. And then the other moments, I'm really trying to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And I think that's really important because we can be so focused on certain people, especially like the bride and the bride, the bride and groom and the groom, during the wedding day. But when we take a step back and look at the whole scene and zoom out, then we get to see everything else going on. And then we get to see how other people are interacting. So maybe instead of just taking a photo of the bride reading, a note or a letter someone gave her, I'm able to take a step back and then get it through the perspective of two of her bridesmaids who actually happened to give her that gift and show this perspective. And the little storytelling elements to me that I never would have shot before are maybe um the powder like spilled all over the counter with the, you know, empty shooter and some like half-eaten cheese and crackers, you know? And to me, you know, pop some flash on and, like, give it a little bit of an editorial moment, like, those are the details that I love and I feel, like, so excited about when I'm going through the gallery. And then I think it also looks like in post being a little more intentional. For example, I at this one wedding, I was able to shoot a very similar perspective of the bride over her shoulder, looking at herself in the mirror, fixing her necklace, and then the groom over his shoulder, looking at himself in the mirror, fixing his bow tie. And instead of having them separate in the gallery, like under the groom's portraits and the bride's portraits, I actually put them right next to each other in the gallery. So I was able to show like the different perspectives of them doing like almost the same thing on their wedding day. So I think really taking that step back, getting to know your couple, seeing what they're comfortable with, trying to get all the different perspectives, you know, close up, medium shot, wide shot, over the shoulder shots through different people's perspectives, kind of challenging yourself like, what are all the different ways I can shoot this scene rather than just the one traditional way, is how I've applied cinematic storytelling to my wedding days because it is, in all honesty, a lot more challenging to apply that style, at least for me, during weddings rather than just a creative shoot.
Yeah, no, for sure. And well, and also at the end of the day, well, unless you're posing at all times, you know, at the end of the day, everyone's telling a story on a wedding day because you're just documenting something that's happening. Um, Everyone is shooting a story and telling it in a storytelling type perspective, no matter how that looks or feels. Every wedding day is technically cinematic because you're literally a part of someone's story. You're documenting it unless somehow you only came in, like, shot family photos and left. Um, but on sessions, it's like you have to create that story. You have to figure out how to make it feel natural, how to bring it out of the client, how to even start in something like that, which I think in some ways might really overwhelm some photographers. In other ways, some photographers might absolutely thrive shooting like that, you know? Um, what would be in your like, what do you do for sessions? Let's pop back to sessions because I do feel like they're a lot more involved, or at least in my scenario, I'm honestly like planning sessions way more than I'm planning weddings. Which maybe some people would hear that and think, "Oh, but weddings are like such a big deal." It's like, no, you are documenting a lot more than you're directing with weddings. With sessions, you're directing probably a little bit more than you're documenting, depending on your style of photography, of course. But in mine, I'm very involved in like the planning process, and I feel like you are as well. So on the front end, what would you say are some tips and tricks on like if someone wanted to build out a more cinematic type style or session with their couples engagements, couple shoots, things like that? On the front end, what do you do in your client experience to kind of like figure out, oh, I do want to like have them get coffee with each other or who knows what, you know, like how these ideas that might pop into maybe your head, like maybe some of them come naturally to you and you just pitch it to the client. But or maybe you have a questionnaire and the client tells you things they enjoy doing, you build off that. I don't know your approach. So I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe what your like pre-shoot approach is for some of your sessions.
Mm. Yeah, so with paid client work, I always try and listen to their story, you know. I'll suggest ideas and, you know, help build off of them, but the first thing I'm always doing is asking them for their own love story. And I think details come up in that. You really just have to pay attention to them. For example, I just shot a couple and in their questionnaire, they said they met studying abroad. They're, you know, inseparable, whatever, but they're like the old boring couple who likes doing crossword puzzles and they play video games together in the whole nine yards. And like just straight off the bat, I was like, okay, crossword puzzles. You know, we
Yeah, that'd
have
be
to find a
cute.
way, right? We have to find a way to incorporate this. And one of my favorite questions to ask is because I think when you're digging into, let me backtrack. So a lot of times couples don't think that what they do is necessarily worth, you know, a photo shoot. So I did this one photo shoot, one of my favorites I ever did, honestly, and they made pasta. And they said every Sunday that's their tradition, and they just put on music in the kitchen and they make pasta together. But removed from photography, like if I was inquiring with a photographer, I would never in a million years think, hey, can you do a photo shoot of me making pasta in my kitchen? Like, you wouldn't think of that, you know? You'd think of the traditional, like, let's go to the mountain and stand there and smile. So that is your job as the photographer to pull that information out of them
Mhm.
and really ask the right questions in order to get that information. And a question that I think works a lot for me is like, what do you guys do on a typical Sunday when there's no distractions and it's just the two of you? Or what would you guys do if the power was out? You know, it's silly little questions, maybe, but you kind of have to keep digging. And I feel like in the beginning, it was a little bit harder for me because I feel like I'd ask my couples what they like doing together, and they'd be like, we like skiing and running. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do a photo shoot of you skiing or running. So looks like I'm SOL, you know? But now I know how to dig in, and asking the right questions might lead me to, oh, well, on Wednesday nights, we do a no phone night, and Ellie likes to read and write poetry, and Liam likes to play guitar. And now we're getting these little bits and pieces that are going to help us craft entire story together. And something that's so big on story, big in storytelling that I am preaching and preaching and preaching is that it needs to make sense. So, like, if we're going to go from doing crossword puzzles, like, first of all, where are we going to do it? Okay, we're going to do it at a coffee shop. Um, is the coffee shop going to be really packed? You know, maybe it's maybe the aesthetic coffee shop that you ideally want to have in your photos is going to be absolutely packed, and it's going to make the couple feel uncomfortable. So, like, can we do a little more digging? Can we go on a weekday when it's going to be the least busy? Like, these are really important things for your clients. And maybe I'm going to use my 35 millimeter lens or even my 40 millimeter pancake lens rather than my 2070 to make everyone feel more comfortable and casual if I'm going to be shooting in a public environment, you know? Especially my clients, you know, even as a photographer, I'm not sure if I'd ever feel comfortable like shooting at a crowded coffee shop or bookstore with a big old 2870 out and like 50 other people around me, you know? And then how are we threading the needle? Like, if my couple does still want to incorporate like the foothills, the mountains, okay, how are we getting there? How are we getting to the coffee shop to there? What are we doing there? And how is this threading the storyline? So, okay, maybe we're on a road trip. We stopped at a coffee shop, you know, brought our newspaper, crossword puzzle. Then I'm taking photos of them in the car, maybe singing with each other, listening to music. Then we're at our next location, and what are we doing there? Like, are we sightseeing? Are we just taking a quick pit stop, you know? How are we stringing this story along? Because a lot of times I think that can be the missing piece is we're just thinking in different scenes, but we're not doing that flow part in the middle of how did we get here, and that's kind of how our stories don't align. So when you have these main building blocks like the crossword puzzle, the road trip, the couple that loves movies, you know, then we can build this story, then we can build this session and add in all these other elements like pulling in color theory. If the table at the coffee shop is blue, maybe we get some red mugs, you know, help the couple with their styling. Then we're getting in the car, doing those kind of flow, like middle between scene shots, then we're in the mountains, we're having a picnic, whatever, and then maybe they finish off their day with a drive-in movie theater to kind of keep that theme of being outside, the whole 9 yards, and then we're closing it just as a movie wouldn't abruptly end. So having, in summary, um, I wish I knew the letters, on Reddit. They always like do that little line at the bottom, like TLD. I don't know
I
what it
think
is.
so.
And then they're just basically like in one sentence, like, here's what I'm saying. Just having these main building blocks and just building and building and building off of those in order to fill out this entire story.
Yeah, no, and I actually totally agree on like the coffee shop side of things. I feel like hotels, coffee shops, bars, things like that got really popular, and people didn't realize like how to actually shoot in them well. I actually always suggest if you live near a big city, like hop on Peerspace. Like if your couples are into this, it doesn't take away from the story, the fact that the restaurant's not open because you're literally curating something. It's like you're producing a music video. Like these people are basically actors at this point. It's okay if the coffee shop is not open or like we rented a wine bar. Wine bar was not open, but they let us pour drinks and we had a drink for because that was something they enjoyed doing together. And had we done it like when it was busy, they would have been uncomfortable. All the guests in the bar would have been uncomfortable. Everyone would have been uncomfortable and the photos would not have been as good. And so I always like to say, like, say you want to take an approach of maybe, yeah, you are directing your couple is low key an actor in their own story. Like, you can think of it like you're on a set. Like, this coffee shop doesn't have to be open. Like, the bar doesn't have to be open. The hotel doesn't have to be, they don't have to be sleeping in that hotel. Maybe they do if the hotel's going to give them permission. Who knows? But you can rent out a lot of these types of spaces, which really helps people with these types of shoots. So yeah, Peerspace, if you've never used it before, for anyone listening, I might can even drop a link that gives you like $50 credit in the show notes. I think I have one, but I love Peerspace. I live in LA, so I have an advantage. But most bigger cities have Peerspace, and we lived in Portland. Well, we didn't live in Portland, but I shoot in Portland a lot. Yeah, we've rented bars before, restaurants. Have rented like little fake homes because even if someone enjoys doing something in their home, maybe they really don't want it shot in their home. My home, I wouldn't want photos of my home, but I wouldn't mind something that has something to do with me and Jake in that type of environment, not in mine. So basically, think of it like Airbnb for photography rentals. So if you've never heard of it, go use it. I think it's great if you're going to pursue these types of sessions. And also, like, no reason to like kind of negatively impact someone's business. Like, you're shooting a coffee shop during business hours. It kind of makes everyone uncomfortable. Might as well just like pay and have it for an hour before they open. So pro tip for anyone listening. I just went on a little tangent, but I'm like, I just feel like it's so good for people to know that things like that exist because it does make life a lot easier. Yes, you need to convince your client to obviously pay for this, but most clients are willing to pay for it. Back on your favorite session being pasta, though, I wanted to say when I was branding into longer form type sessions, the inquiry that made it click for me of like, oh, I finally am showcasing enough of this that people understand what I'm trying to book was when a client inquired and they said, yeah, we just bought a home and we just kind of want you to like document us like making dumplings. And I was like, what? This is a real inquiry? I was like, this is crazy. I think everything's worked. Because I didn't know if people were going to be into it. Like, it wasn't as popular in the industry then. And I was like, you have to be kidding me. They literally want me to come shoot them making dumplings. Like, what are the odds? It was crazy. I'm sure you get some of that now where it is kind of like random. Someone will inquire and be like, oh, I want to just do this. And you're like, of course, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever used Peerspace though?
I have used Peerspace before. I mean, I live like 2 hours from Denver, so like they have a lot going on there. But I'm a really big advocate of not making other people uncomfortable by you and your big ass camera and lens.
Yes.
So we gotta educate on that like social awareness, you know.
Yes. For sure. And even just for the clients, yeah, coffee shops, when I haven't rented them and we've just gone to one that they like, Normally, I try and find, like, sometimes they have, like, a cute table outside. That's always
Mhm.
nice because 'cause you're, like, outside and by yourself in some capacity, but, yeah, I love what you said about having things flow. I went to a video workshop actually once, because I thought I would implement Super 8 more in my work, and it was led with a director, and, one of my biggest pet peeves was thinking that this was a video workshop led with a director. I assumed there would be a really good plot because you need that in video. In photo editorial, you can change outfits a million times and like a million times and it's still like bomb photos that people enjoy. But video I was like, yeah, we need like a story, And they changed outfits like 8 times. And I was like, I don't have a story anymore. Like, I don't understand the concept. Maybe changing once, okay, they maybe spent the night in this hotel or something, but like at the 8th time of an outfit change, to me, I was like, what is the plot? And then for video, I was like, this makes it even more confusing. I was like, it wasn't connecting to me. So I love that you brought that up, like to have things connect because truly, yeah, if it's just like a random mishmash, like how does that as a viewer connect and make any sense? To me, it's not a story at that point. The story is gone, you know? Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
video. Isn't that crazy that at a video workshop they changed outfits like 8 times? I was like, what story do we have here?
Yeah, like what's your oh my gosh. What are your credits? Like what are
Like
we
what
what are
is
we doing
happening?
here? Yeah.
Yeah. I think they just had a lot of like cool outfits they wanted to do, but to me I was like there's no plot. So, as far as video, I
Yeah.
don't know what you want me to do here.
Well, I think that could almost like that's a really good segue because I think going off of that is I say I think before everything I say, and I'm like, obviously I think. That's why I'm saying it.
You're like, I know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, anyways, that's a good segue because that is really, really, really important with storytelling work. I think is you don't have to be so overambitious, you're going to have a lot of different photo shoots. You don't have to do everything in one photo shoot. And sometimes when we have too much going on, we're taking away from the storyline. I saw an incredible movie last night that, of course, I'm probably not going to remember the name of, but it was so cinematic and so inspiring. It was shot in 4 by 5
Hmm.
format. So I feel like it was called Small Things Like These.
Hmm.
And I feel like if a movie like Saltburn is shot in like square or 4 by 5, you just like know it's going to be a good movie. But anyways, it was so cinematic, so inspiring. But all of the scenes took place in like 3 different spots for the
Hmm.
whole 2 hour long movie. And that made the storyline even more compelling and way stronger, because it's not overly complicated. And I don't know how many of you guys can just think of a movie where too much was going on and you were so lost and it just made you lose interest in the movie and you were like, I don't know, there was too much sauce. Like, I wasn't following along and then they lost the plot. So I think it's incredible to be ambitious, but challenge yourself to do as much as you can with simplicity. The photo shoot I did for my course, I was originally thinking of doing this like whole elaborate kind of Lumineers type deal thing where, they ran around the town all day and the whole 9 yards. And then I was like, I don't feel like that is the best um, a learning opportunity because it was so complicated. And I was like, what if I challenged myself for my course and did something in my backyard and then like around the corner? And I don't think my backyard is the most aesthetic thing ever. I have like apartment buildings towering over me, and I have just like a cutesy little garden in the corner, and I have like, you know, wire fences. But I was like, if I can make this look beautiful and cinematic, then that's what I'm here to teach, you know? I'm not here to teach like how to create the most complex, complicated photo shoot and make it cinematic. I'm here to teach how to make art out of something mundane. So I did it in my backyard. And then for the second part of the story, we rounded the corner and rode our bikes to this green patch of grass that had literally nothing else going on. And we created this whole story out of it. But that goes to show that I find a lot of people get discouraged and feeling like they don't have these big enough ideas, myself included. But I think it's even more incredible to make a story out of something simple. And then also, knowing when to take a step back. I think after doing so many years of traditional post photography, I kind of was like, I knew the amount of sessions I could take every week. I knew that I would do mini sessions 3 times a year, and it was like clockwork. Whereas this kind of work, I think, burns you out easier because you're giving a lot to it and you're being really intentional. And I had, my like season where I was absolutely on fire and creating all the time and just feeling so inspired. And then I got to this point where I feel like this sounds horrible to say, but I was like secretly hoping that my clients would cancel or like it would get rained out or something because I was so burnt out and exhausted, even though I loved the kind of work I was creating because I was doing too much of it and it doesn't translate. Like being able to do 10 mini sessions does not translate into the amount of energy it would take to do 10 storytelling sessions. So I think creatively, taking these breaks are so important. And I had such a busy wedding season. I just, even though I was excited at the prospect of all these inquiries, I had super cool people who wanted to create with me in all the states I was traveling to for weddings. I was like, I know that I am not going to be able to deliver the kind of work they're booking and paying me for right now because I was so burnt out from all the sessions I was doing and from wedding season. So I was like, if I want to create incredible things later, I need to take this responsibility and put a pause on it right now so I don't drain whatever's left of me. So I also think that's really important, like knowing when to take a break.
Yeah, and I always say too, for anyone that wants to venture into longer form sessions, like that you got to price it right. Like you shouldn't be doing probably even multiple a month, like, and hopefully they're at a price to where it compensates for that, because a 1 hour session, maybe someone was charging like $300 to $500 for it. These longer form sessions, like 1500. Okay, you may have needed to take three, now you only need to take one. Devote all your energy to that one. If you price it too low, you're going to need to do a lot for income, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of emotional work, like you said. It's a lot of like digging so much deeper than just going and getting a task done. And so definitely, if you want to move into longer form sessions, make sure it's at a price point that makes it worth it to you. But also, to me, then it's so much more fulfilling because I'm shooting so much less, but I'm shooting things that I'm so much more involved in and like invested in and like have this like such bigger like creative presence in. And so for me, it's like so much more fulfilling than if I were doing like 5 engagement shoots a month or like X amount of engagement shoots a month, you know? So definitely make sure that like even just down to logistics, that price like compensates for the fact that it is way more work than a normal engagement session, normal couple session, you know?
Yeah, right.
And I'm not saying you didn't do that.
That's
I'm just
huge.
saying for anyone that wants to transition into it, I always tell people like you need to make sure even your marketing aligns with making that sort of jump because it needs to cost a lot more than normal sessions would have cost, you know?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that's so important in finding the clients who value that kind of work, because I have plenty of couples that inquire with me and they're like, I like your photos. I want to pay $200 for a half an hour session. And I'm like, I don't know what
You're like, I
story we're
can't do that in
telling.
a half hour.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know what story we're telling in half an hour. Uh, but, you will find the clients who understand, the price behind 4 hours of telling a story, you know? And it's so crazy to me. I was like looking back at photos this morning and what my career used to look like. And I remember like constantly negotiating with people about prices. And I remember I used to have this horrible like feeling that I thought was just this like thing I knew that was my truth, that like the market was so saturated already, like when I was already in high school, that like there wouldn't be room for me by the time I was old enough to pursue photography as a career. So I never really considered it as a career. I just remember being in high school and thinking there's already so many good photographers. Like by the time I'm 20, like there's definitely not going to be any room for me. And I would do photography as a side gig, and people would be negotiating my prices with me. And I mean,
Mm,
I was only charging like one or 200 bucks, it was not like negotiating anything crazy. And then, like, full circle, this past spring, I had a client fly me out to Florida for a couple session. Like, I thought people only got flown out for weddings. And sometimes I like will sit on Instagram and be like, "Oh, this photographer got to do this." And then like I'm reminded, like, no, like these opportunities are here. I've experienced them myself. And I think, it's easy to like compare and see what other people are doing and take away from your own experiences. But also, like, the main point here is knowing that when you value your work and you find your niche and you price yourself in a way that is equivalent to your worth and shows that you actually value your own worth, like you really will just find those kind of clients who would spend the money to fly you out for just a couple session, not even a wedding. So I think breaking into it, the best thing you can do is free sessions, creative sessions while you're in there. And when you're in the nation not feeling creatively inspired, doing free sessions and doing things that are going to fill your cup creatively. But when it comes to client work, pricing yourself in a way where it's sustainable, in a way that shows like I value my art too, and I only align with clients who see that value.
yeah, and honestly, most of the time, you're gonna have more pushback from a lower price range than a higher price range. You just have to build the momentum, the marketing to hit that higher price range and the people that are willing to spend that kind of money because it's okay if it's not everyone, like, everyone has different amounts of money they make and they're willing to spend, and we don't need to convert every single client, but also at a higher price point, you don't need to take as many sessions. So I think for most people, they're just like worried, well, what if people don't pay for it? I'm like, well, you only need a third of the clients now. So it's okay if you lose some people in the process. Um, but I always also told people just practical tip. I mean, we can end this out in a second, but practical tip if you want to kind of transition is I had a 1 hour and a 2 hour session. The 1 hour is the simple, like, do the shots, while I was building my portfolio for this longer form brand. And then I had a 2 hour that was incentivized. It was like, a better deal. I mean, it wasn't cheaper than the 1 hour, but it was a better deal to do the 2 hour than it would be to do two of the 1 hour. So there was like incentives, like it allowed for a location change and the 1 hour didn't. So there was reasons that it made it something that people really wanted to book, like sales wise. And then in the 2 hour, that was like my baby. I was like, okay, in this session, even though it might not be as long as maybe I ideally want, maybe sometimes more than 2 hours, these are going to be the ones I almost build my portfolio with. So I was building my long form, almost marketing, like storytelling type, uh, social media presence portfolio with literally paid work, because in the 2 hour session, I was able to be like, okay, maybe we're starting at a coffee shop and ending out in nature. Like maybe we're doing this and then that, because it allowed for the time to do that. And I probably spent a little extra time with some of these clients, but there are ways to take even your current paid work and build your portfolio if you don't have time to do a ton of free work, but then kind of supplement it with that free stuff and don't show the things you don't want to book. I think that's like a common misconception, that people need to post every client they shoot. And I'm like, you need to post what you want to shoot. Like at the end of the day, you need to, whether it's marketing material, whether it's your website, if you are stuck in a place of trying to make that transition, you do a session that you don't feel like aligns with that transition, that's okay to not share it. Like we're business owners and our clients should respect that. And if they don't, it's okay. You don't need them to be a long-standing client. Like at the end of the day, you're a business and you need to post what you want to book, what future you wants to book, not what you right now are booking. So kind of like I even say with people that like say someone wants to shoot elopements and they're shooting weddings. I'm like, okay, well say you're still shooting the weddings because you need to make livable income. Post the sunset portraits. Don't post anything with a person in it. If you're trying to brand towards elopements, there's like ways to use even your current work to help your transition into different avenues if you're trying to make one right now. So, anyways, want to leave everyone on that little tip. But is there anything you want to leave anyone on before we wrap up? Tell everyone about
Uh,
your course.
yeah, I'd love to. So my course, I launched it September 30th. It's called Cinematic Storytelling for Photographers, and it is a course that just teaches photography in in a way that's rooted in the study of cinema. I had this idea a while ago, and I've done so much traditional photography education and, how we book a photo shoot, how we pose clients, the whole nine yards. But I was like, I haven't really seen photography just taught in the same way that cinema is taught because when I was transitioning to my style, I studied cinema. I stopped studying photography. I started studying filmmakers and cinematographers and movies. And instead of, learning poses, I was learning different shots like over the shoulder shots, dirty singles, different perspective shots, color grading, color theory, these really eye-catching color grades we see in movies like teal and orange that like we'd never think to do in our traditional photography because I did like the same preset on every single photo versus color grading to every single different scene with color theory in mind, with how the scene feels, color psychology, how each color impacts our emotions and helps us tell that story. And it was so crazy to me thinking that I had never really been taught any of these things in traditional photography education. And I just kind of wanted to put it all in a course. A big thought of mine, especially when, I was planning this, was do I make it into different mini courses? Because I was like, this is low key like everything I know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to like put out any other education after this because it's like all of it. But I kind of felt like I wanted to just have a all-in-one course that teaches you all the basics of cine, or not all the basics, I mean basic and advanced, like everything about cinematic photography rather than having to go to all these different spots. And just kind of this investment piece in, wanting to change your work in the sense where like the when I have invested in my business is when I've ever seen like the most, turnaround in it. I've made it back so quickly. And something I was, kind of trying to explain is like for one like $900,000 storytelling session, that is the equivalent of doing 5 of your quick little like $200 30 minutes. I
Mm-hmm.
hate this, classic post sessions, 5 versus 1 that you feel passionate about. And then in the same sense, like you book one storytelling session, that's the price of the course. And then that's the price of more than anything, like feeling excited, feeling alive, like being passionate about your work. And, I really wanted to break it down in a way that was digestible. I got a lot of feedback from people on how is education the most digestible for you. A lot of people shared with me they like photos, they like graphics, stuff like that, rather than just like someone filming it at a studio. And looking at a talking head and losing engagement. So I kind of took all of these pieces, and then I wanted to make sure that people were able to apply it. So then I built a community for it, and we have a huge group chat, and we do feedback, we do monthly like Q&A kind of meeting things, and we go more in depth on the course and make sure that people are actually able to apply these cinematic principles, and people are able to share the photo shoots that they're doing after joining this course and whatnot. So that is basically the whole thing. It is one big, fat, juicy course about everything cinematic and storytelling. And I feel like it's my little baby. I'm sure you understand this, but like when you do education and you honestly are in education for like the right reasons, and you kind of know like your heart stands on what you put out, and it's not just like a money grab. It's like I might not even like, I don't even know how many of these I'll sell or if it's going to set me up for like future education, but like this is just like everything like I want you to be able to learn. And I feel like you just like love it with your whole heart, and you can't even like describe it in a way that does it justice, because it's just like this is my thing I created.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Yeah, when you were saying that you joined the wait list for this education thing I was supposed to do, oh, that hurt my heart because I was like, I worked on that for like a year. It never came to fruition. There was issues in production. I was partnered with people, so that was kind of why it is not a thing. And then it tainted my. I was like, I don't want to do a course ever again. And I'm like, and then I was teaching with Jennifer Moore, and we were both teaching at the same workshop in Canada, and it was my light bulb moment. She was like, Summer, you're an educator. Where's your education? And I was like, uh, well, you see, I tried, and then I gave up because it was a lot to go through when that didn't come to life, because we worked on it for like over a year, like fly to different places, recorded a ton of stuff. Um, but that was kind of what, birthed the podcast. I was like, well, in the meantime, I'll start stuff, Jen. Birthed the podcast, birthed um, my coaching program. It birthed a lot of like different things. And so I'm hoping, obviously, I still want to put out a course one day, like something that people can, have and download and not have to just join. But yeah, I was like, I know exactly what you're referencing when you say that I had education coming. But it's okay. Something will come out one day for all of you. But for now, it is pretty minimal, I guess. But the coaching program is our like main thing as of now, and it's not like can't purchase it. I mean, you can be a part of the program, but I love that you hopped on the gun so fast and you marketed your education so well. So I am very impressed, and it's been so fun to have you on. Tell everyone where they can find you. Everything will be in the show notes as always, and in the description, whatever and wherever you're listening. But tell everyone, in case they're just listening to audio, like where they can find you on Instagram, because your Instagram is different than your name.
Yes, my Instagram is Wild Faith Photo. I wanted my Instagram to be Hannah Faith Photo, but it was taken. So I was like, what else sounds good with my middle name? So my Instagram's Wild Faith Photo, and that's about the only spot you're gonna find me besides my website. I'm not good on any of the other socials.
Is
So
your
find me.
website also Wild Faith Photo, and that has education and for inquiries and stuff, or is it two different websites?
Yes, it's wildfaithphoto.co. And then on the top right, you'll find a little button that says for photographers, and that'll take you to your home if you want to
Perfect.
explore. But yeah, I like couldn't believe when you asked me to be on the podcast. I was so excited. I was like, I literally, okay, not to like be a weirdo, but I cried. I was so
Stop.
excited because I felt it was so surreal. Like I looked up to you for so long, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here, but I'll be there.
Well, I'm so
So
glad that
yeah.
you came on, and I'm sure everyone will probably love this episode. We haven't talked about storytelling, really anything cinematic in quite a while. I had Jennifer Moore on once, but I feel like me and her talked about Instagram for some reason. So I don't even know if anyone's talked about this. I don't think I've talked about it. So I'm really excited that you came on and like shared some of your thoughts and processes. And yeah, for anyone listening, go ahead and find Hannah. If you're listening and you haven't like reviewed or shared the podcast with a friend, do that because it helps get more amazing people like Hannah on. And yeah, go ahead and share it with a friend. And I can't wait to catch you guys again soon. Thank you so much for coming on, Hannah. And you guys have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.